16 years ago, I was sitting at a meditation center in Sri Lanka as a newly ordained monk, and I had just read a book by Deepak Chopra. And I remember in the book it said that if you don't talk to anyone for 2 days, your mind will be completely still and you will have no thoughts. And I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, I live as a Buddhist monk now. I go to places like this where I don't have to talk to anyone, so I can be quiet and my mind is going to be still. Now, I went to the center and I didn't talk to anyone. I intentionally pulled back and made sure I didn't talk to anyone. And after 2 days, my mind was just as active as before. Granted, it had calmed down a little bit, but yeah, my mind was not still. The monkey mind was still going blah, 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 blah about everything that was going on. And I thought, well, it's just, okay, maybe it's not enough to just kind of be quiet. I have to meditate also. So I started meditating, and my whole reason for becoming a Buddhist monk was because I was interested in meditation and wanted to do more of it. So I spent the next 6 years meditating, on average, maybe 8 hours per day. And I sat a lot and I walked a lot. And I can tell you that stopping the mind completely from having this like background chatter, it's just not going to happen. It's not possible to stop the mind permanently or even long term. What you can do, though, because that's not all doom and gloom, that there's actually like a lot of things that make that unimportant, and there's something you can do which is much more beneficial. But the thing with the thoughts is that we can slow them down. Thoughts, in Buddhism at least, are seen kind of like a sense. So if you hit your arm really hard many times over and over, you will feel the sensations on your skin that you've been hitting it. And it's the same with the mind. If you put in a lot of social media, you look at a lot of things that excite you, your mind is going to be spitting out thoughts. If you're subjected to a lot of thoughts and ideas, which includes Buddhist ideas, spiritual ideas, your mind will run away with this and come up with concepts and ideas. So the mind will be activated by these things. Now, Buddhist meditation centers, specifically Theravadan centers, make everything dull and gray, and there's nothing supposed to activate or stimulate the mind. And that is really beneficial for certain types of meditation. Long term, I don't think that's a good place to spend your time in. But it is beneficial for many things. So you can slow down your thoughts by limiting the stimuli you give it. For you and I mean, I'm no longer ordained as a Buddhist monk, and you, I'm assuming, are not either. Then one of the easiest things you can do is just put down your phone. Like, just stop doom scrolling every time with everything you do. You go to the bathroom, the telephone. You're going to cook some food, telephone, but it's not just enough to, you have to look through all the YouTube videos. Like, just use the telephone less is a great way to just limit the stimuli you have on your mind. But more than that, it's also about understanding that when the mind does stop, because it can happen if you're really good at concentration meditation, and if you do meditate, the mind will stop. I mean, it does happen. There are moments when the mind is calm. There's also different things you can go through where you have thoughts, but they're just like a echo in the background. They don't really affect you that much, and I'll get into that more later. But the idea of stopping your monkey mind is a fallacy. It's just not going to happen. And if anything, if you have a meditation teacher that keeps saying, it's stopping the mind, it's like the stopping of the mind is the main thing, and that's what we're trying to get to. And if you focus really hard and you do what I tell you, we're going to stop your mind. If they say that, then I would probably look for a different meditation teacher, because either they simply haven't meditated that much, or they uphold an ideal that just doesn't work. Because I've spoken to hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, well, actually thousands of people about their meditation, and it just doesn't work. I mean, I've met people who meditated for 40, 50 years, like I did for just a few years, and their minds are also still activated. But it does change, and there are some things that are really different. So once you've realized that you can't stop your thoughts, the obvious solution seems to be, okay, I can still do something with them, right? And what many people tend to do is that we try to change our way of relating to the thoughts or thinking about the thoughts. So one way of doing this is positive thinking. Positive thinking basically says that, okay, so imagine you have some difficult thoughts. You think that, oh my goodness, I'm sick. Like right now I have 3 herniated discs in my neck and I'm in severe pain that makes it difficult for me to sleep, and I'm having issues with it that makes life very painful. And I could use positive thinking by saying that, well, you know what, I'm sure this is going to be okay because I've had these problems before and it healed then, so I'm sure it will heal again. That will minimize the amount of doomsday thoughts I have, the amount of difficult thoughts that I have running at me about, oh my goodness, my life is ruined, I'm never going to be able to sleep again, I'm going to be burnt out, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to lose my family, I'm going to get some kind of serious disease, because when you sleep as little as I do, that's not healthy long term. You can't continue living like that. Well, obviously you can, as long as you can, and then you can't. But that would be positive thinking, and that can help. But what does that actually do? What it does is that it has the effect of limiting the friction between, so my reality is pain, right? And my desire for reality is I don't want to have pain. Now, when I change positive thinking, it basically does it so that I start thinking, well, it's going to be okay. This is going to change. So then this friction here in between my reality and my desire for reality kind of slows down. Another way of doing that is what's called as non-duality, or it's Advaita. It's a whole tradition where you basically try to make yourself believe that you don't exist, or there's no separation, so we're all one. So you're not actually this thing. I'm everything. So it doesn't matter if this body dies and what happens to this body, because ultimately I am everything. So I can kind of let go of this friction and distortion in between by changing my thoughts. The problem is that as soon as you stop believing that, then this will come back, because you haven't actually looked at the problem, which is this friction. The problem is not reality. The problem is not your desire for reality. The problem is when these don't match. And just to emphasize, this is just like a top level view we're talking about now. This goes much, much deeper into how we relate to the world around you. Like everything around you creates a pressure, creates this distortion, like all objects, all sensations and things that you put into your senses creates a friction with reality. So by trying to convince yourself that you don't exist, you can limit this, but that has some other really negative side effects also, like it can cause disassociation and people can get really weird. And I have people all the time who contact me and say, like, I have issues because I did this and now I messed up my mind, or I can't relate to people, and they're having a hard time adjusting to reality around them because of this. So that seems pretty kind of futile then to do anything, because we've tried stopping thoughts and realized that, okay, we cannot stop it. Like I said, I've meditated tens of thousands of hours, and it's not possible to make your thoughts just stop long term. You can do it short term, yes. But ultimately, as soon as you start moving around again, the thoughts are going to come up. You can limit your environment, make the thoughts go down, but as soon as you start moving around again, the thoughts come up. And even if you limit your environment, there's still going to be thoughts. You could also do, like I said, positive thinking, and that will make the effects of the thoughts a little bit less, but there still has the problem with that you believe that the way you feel is dependent on what happens to you. Non-duality kind of tries to sidestep this by changing your core beliefs about who you are and what you are, and so that you have less friction, but it still doesn't point at the problem, because the problem when you talk about that is that that's a concept, that's a belief that you're then going to try to defend and say that, oh, this is true, this is not true, like all of what you say is wrong, it's actually this that is the truth. So you're trying to defend a concept which in and of itself is trying to be not a concept, but yeah. But there is another way of doing this, and that's something that it took me a long time to kind of understand what was happening inside of me when I started doing this. But if you look at this, again, from a top level, and you have reality and your desire for reality, and they don't match, you can actually observe this distortion, this friction. In Buddhism, it's called dukkha, which is basically translated into suffering, which I think is a really bad way of translating it, even though it makes a lot of sense once you understand how to view it. The problem is that we say suffering, and we say, okay, I'm suffering. I'm suffering because my neck is bad, so now I'm suffering. No, that's not suffering. The suffering is the pressure that is created from me thinking, I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. That pressure, that is the suffering, which is translated into from a word in Sanskrit that meant when you had a wheel and the axle in the wheel didn't run smoothly, when there was friction and distortion. Opposite of the word of sukha, which is when everything just flows smoothly. So what we can do is we can look directly at this friction and see that, hey, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Because you are the one who's doing this. You are the one who are in control in your reaction towards your thoughts. And you can choose to react differently. The problem is you probably can't yet, because you haven't learned how to do that. You have learned to do that with certain things, and just by growing old, you will naturally let go of how you relate to certain things, but you can actively change this. And the best way that I have found out how to do this is, this sounds too simple to be true, but it is to focus on enjoying being alive. It's really that simple. Just focus on enjoying being here. Because if you look at it, what happens is that I have this pain in my neck. So what I want to do is I want to move over there where I don't have pain in my neck. In other words, I don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else. You don't earn enough money? Well, you don't want to be here. You want to be over there where you earn more money. Your kids are yelling at you, screaming, not doing what they're supposed to do, cleaning up after themselves, smearing poop on the walls, whatever they do, you don't want to be there. You want to be over there where they're behaving, where everything is fine. In other words, you don't actually want to exist here. You want to exist over there. You're not allowing yourself to fully experience what it feels like to be here, to be naked to your emotions that come up, the frustration, the anger, the fear, everything that comes up. Instead, you plaster something else over it and say, if I can just get over there, it will be better, but I don't want to face all these difficult things here. Now, saying that, I also want to point out that for some people this can be overwhelming because it's too much if you've been pushing it down, but just look at what it feels when you start trying to just say, well, could I just be happy now? Why do I need to wait? Why should I wait until tomorrow with feeling happy and enjoying being here? And you say, well, my circle, you don't know what they did to me. You know what? No, I know. And I'm not saying life isn't tough for you or like life isn't difficult. We've all gone through difficult things. And maybe what you're going through is so much worse than I could ever imagine, but it still doesn't change that you can choose how you relate to the world around you right now. We see this quite often in extreme circumstances where people go through really difficult things and they all of a sudden pop out of themselves and they go like, oh, I was in a car accident and the car was flipping around and I was just admiring the reflections of the glass and the window and how the sun was spinning around me as the car was flipping around. But there was no fear, there was no anger, there was no worry. It was just things happening. But most likely you don't have to worry about those extreme things because very likely if you're listening to this, you're sitting somewhere comfortable and life is not falling apart around you. So really look at what the problem is with your thoughts. It's not your thoughts. And it's not that you need to change your thoughts or morph them into something else. There's another component to thoughts that is the problem, which is the way we relate to our thoughts, the friction, the pressure, the tension you have between what you believe needs to happen and what doesn't happen. With other people, this is something that kind of often comes to the forefront when we have conflicts, when you get irritated at people because they did something I didn't want them to do and you start pushing against them. And I think that's one of the best points to start if you want to start looking at this. How do I actually do this? Because it might sound, either you listen to this, you say like, oh, he's just an idiot. He doesn't understand what he's talking about and he's just deluding himself. Or you listen to this and you say, oh, that makes a bit of sense actually. Maybe I don't have to change my thoughts. Maybe it's about how I'm relating to those thoughts. And one of the places where we have lots of difficult thoughts is in conflict. So when you get irritated at other people, this is something that comes up and makes it very difficult to enjoy being here because they did this to me. I made a video here where you can see more in detail about what actually happens inside of us, how do we deal with it, and what can you do to not be so affected by these difficult thoughts and emotions that come up, and instead learning to enjoy just being here, experiencing the world through your senses.